We actually added friction. So when somebody came in and said, view all rings, I didn't show them a single product. I blocked off that page and forced them to choose what style of ring are you looking for.
Welcome to the Experimentation Edge, where product managers, data scientists, and engineers talk about how they make smarter decisions. I'm Ashley Stirrup, the Chief Marketing Officer for Growthbook, and in each episode, I'll sit down with an executive to unpack how they use experimentation and A/B testing to make better decisions. This show is sponsored by Growthbook, the open source experimentation platform leader. Now let's jump in and get started with our next guest. Welcome, Craig Kistler, Vice President of Experience, Design, Personalization, Experimentation at Signet Jewelers. So happy to have you on the show.
It's awesome. Thanks for having me.
You've been at Signet a long time, 14 years. Maybe we can start with you just telling us a little bit about Signet as a business.
Yeah. So Signet Jewelers is the parent company for the mall retailers in the United States. So Kay Jewelers, Jared Jewelers, Zales, Peoples out of Canada, Banter, a couple others. So it's the parent company of all these brands that you see all over your TV commercials.
Got it. I had no idea they were all under the same umbrella. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
And so that makes experimentation interesting because you have a hybrid online and in-person model.
correct. Yep.
Yeah. Before we get into all that, we talk a little bit about you and your background. I love the variety of backgrounds that our guests have, and you started on the design side, so that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I went to art school and then experimentation.
Yeah, and then you've been at Signet for 14 years now.
Yep. Yeah. So I started at Signet 14 years ago as the first and only UX designer there. When they called, I hadn't heard of Signet. I thought it was just a mom and pop jeweler. I'm like, nah, I'm not into it. And then they said who they were, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. But even 14 years ago, user experience design, that was a thing. And I was the first one coming in there. So I built that team up. And then from there, we brought in A/B testing, and I got my hands on that. And that felt interesting, felt like an addition to what we were doing with creating a better experience. And then I just kind of took that over, and we've been running that standpoint and went from experimentation to personalization through some changes in the org. User experience and XD left my purview. It has recently come back. So now it's back where I started. So now it's user experimentation and personalization.
Got it. And was there a particular trigger that caused you to start doing A/B testing, or was it just a natural evolution of how do you keep upping your game?
Yeah, a little bit of both. So we had a tool come in. We brought in a tool, and there was a team using it, and I kind of started dabbling with it. And I guess maybe I'm just more anal or hands-on. I wasn't really a fan of what we were testing or what we were doing. It just felt frivolous. So I started playing around with it and taking it on, and then it just became natural evolution because it fits so well together. Like we were solving experience problems through usability testing and understanding what customers needed and designing a solution for it. And we'd get feedback, but we got feedback, the typical 8 to 10 people. I had millions of people coming to my sites. Layering that into A/B testing, we could really validate, sure, it's usable, but do people care about it? And does it make a difference? So it just became a natural evolution. And then after we saw the power that it was able to bring to the business, that's kind of where I just focused on that.
And do you feel like your background in design helped you think differently about what should you be testing?
I do. I've said it a lot. I think user experience and personalization and experimentation dovetail really well together because ultimately both of those things should be trying to solve the customer's challenges and problems. For us, we've got tens of thousands of jewelry products. How do we make it easy and relevant for them to find something that they're going to fall in love with? And the design perspective was, all right, how do you make it easy to find the perfect necklace out of 10,000? And that's taxonomy, that's findability, that's all your typical user experience tools. Bringing in A/B testing allowed us to actually test one against the other and see what made the difference. So it was actually tying data to those experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I've always thought that there's an entire value chain and it really should all be connected. Everything from the product management to design to personalization, all of it.
for
So it
sure.
makes a lot of sense. So can you tell us a little bit about how experimentation is organized at your company? Is it all centralized? Do you
Mm.
have is it more of a distributed model?
So we are centralized across the board, as I mentioned, Kay, Jared, Zales, Peoples, etc. They all have their kind of business teams, their brand and marketing teams. They're focused on their kind of P&L for the site. Experimentation and personalization sits underneath the product org, but we're central. So we're looking at experimentation and personalization across all of those different sites, which allows us the scalability of understanding customers at broader scale. So I can take a look and see behaviors that are very similar. Somebody shopping on K versus somebody shopping on Jared. But then where it becomes fun and interesting is the marketing and the things that each of those shoppers needs become different. So now you can start playing around not only with a better experience, but tying in marketing and psychology and intent on those different sites. So while it might be the same experience, you're tweaking it here and there based off of the needs of those individual groups.
Makes total sense. And roughly how many experiments are you running a quarter?
It varies quite a bit. When I was starting this 7, 8 years ago, we were trading in the volume game and we would run sometimes 40, sometimes 50 experiments in a quarter, which was fine. They were smaller. They were should we change the button color? What about this headline? What about this placement on the homepage? And what we started to see was they didn't make really big impact. They were
Mhm.
useful, they were helpful, but once you understood that, the velocity of those kind of slowed down. Now I would say we're somewhere in the realm of 15 to 25, depending. Not because we intentionally hit the brakes, but we're doing more complex and more, what I would say, value driven experiments as opposed to just the best practice of this button color versus that button color.
Can you give an example of something that's more value driven versus something that's a little more tactical?
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll do a big scale would be a PDP redesign. So instead of taking like the add to cart button and moving it around or adding social proof or changing one or two things, which we've done that, sometimes you need to take a look at the entire journey, the entire setup. And we're like, you know what, let's just start over. If we had no rules, no restrictions, what could this page be? We'll design that out and then we'll test that new version against the old version.
Got it. That's a great example. And you've got something like 10 million visitors to your properties. Is that right?
Yeah, K alone typically has about 10-ish million every month. Obviously, that ebbs and flows. Holidays
Yeah.
are crazy. Even some of our smaller sites have a few million a month. So we've definitely got volume. So we can test a lot of things with pretty decent certainty.
Yeah. That's great. Can you tell us about an experiment where you had a lot of learnings?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of where a lot of our experiments are trying to drive now. So I mentioned the smaller experiment. Those are great. You don't get a lot of learnings for those. The PDPs will get a lot of learnings just because there's a lot of things on the page. But the one
Can you explain that acronym for the audience?
product detail page.
Product detail page. Got it.
Yeah. So it's basically your product page. So there's a lot of elements on that page that you could look at with a large experiment. But
Hmm.
one that's relatively simple and straightforward, and I enjoy it because it debunks some of these best practices. We have a PLP or a product listing page, category page, and some of the top viewed pages are the view alls. So somebody's shopping, like, I want to see view all rings. Show me all the rings or show me all the necklaces, which in theory sounds great. So yeah, just give me everything. And our site's large. We've got thousands of products. Nobody wants to shop thousands of products, but they're on that page and they're scrolling through there, especially on mobile. Not a lot of facet usage. So people aren't narrowing down these choices. So the hypothesis we had was, all right, we know somebody's coming in and they're looking for some type of ring. They don't need all rings, but they're on the view all rings page. What can we do to help them narrow that down? And we actually added friction. So when somebody came in and said view all rings, I didn't show them a single product. I blocked off that page and said, force them to choose what style of ring are you looking for? Engagement, band, something more fashion focused. So all the facets, I basically surfaced them, highly visible, increasing the number of clicks before they got to product. So somebody would click in there and going from thousands, they would go to hundreds very quickly. And that was interesting because it was the myth of 3 clicks and all this stuff goes out the window as long as that click is adding value.
Yeah.
So that was kind of something where we were able to kind of talk about that through the organization. And then based on that, we were able to keep iterating on that and introducing these ideas of how do we ask questions? How do we understand what they're looking for and help them based on what they need? Much like you would walk into a store. And we saw a lot of value in doing that.
Yeah. Were you able to measure the impact of doing all that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything we do is always measuring value. Oddly enough, we didn't see exit rates increase because of that extra click. We saw people going deeper, looking at more products, ultimately increasing conversion rates and revenue because they weren't sorting through thousands of products, where that first page of product if somebody was looking for a very specific type of anniversary band to give as a gift, and they go to all rings and typically we're surfacing popular or new, and we've got very popular engagement rings and very new fashion rings. Those are all going to bubble to the top. So on that view all page, they might feel there's nothing relevant to them. So scroll through 20, 30 products and be like, I guess I'm out. I'm going to go someplace else.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that story because I think with so many of the types of experimentation people can do, it's really understanding what's the buyer's journey and how do we create a great buyer's journey. And you'd never have in the store just somebody go, oh, here they all are, right? They'd ask a few questions and they'd really tailor it down. And the user might naturally like, just show me everything. But that's actually not the best answer. It's what's your budget and what's the style, and all those types of things are super important to then giving them relevant options. So that's really interesting that you added friction and it ended up leading to a huge increase in revenue for the business.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it was something that we could roll into other things. We like to talk about insights a lot. It became an insight, foundational level insight that we can then start tacking onto other things to figure out like, where can we go with this?
Yeah. Yeah. That's really powerful when you can kind of take a concept and keep reusing it in additional places. Yeah. And when you talked about doing bigger designs, how do you do things differently when you're doing a major redesign versus just tweaking something?
So there's a lot of similarities. You still have your hypothesis, you still have the questions that you're looking to answer, your metrics are all set up. But on redesign of a page or even a navigation structure, there's so many little elements that you first have to look at, did this help me overall? So did this major change of everything work at least as well and hopefully better than what was there previously? So that's foundational for us. Is, hey, if we're going to go and dev this out and do all this extra work, are we at least going to cover our bases? But then on a page like the PDP, where it's trying to do a lot of things just for the visitor, but a lot of things for the business, there's a bunch of little smaller measurements that we have to take into consideration. So for us, we've got a couple different groups that have elements on that page. So obviously you've got the product, you're trying to sell the product, but we've got a financing group and we've got our own internal credit cards. There's a business tied to that. Oh, immediately, if we're changing something, their concern is, are our credit apps going to slip? Because of that impacts the business. We've got another group that is responsible for our service plans and our warranties. Obviously, they've got business stakes in that. And then other teams like our virtual JC, our chat group, all that are designed to help the customer find the right product, they all have impacts as well. So their red flags are like, hey, you're changing my thing. So how do I measure it? So we have to then come back and say, okay, let's take a look at this. Let's take financing. How did financing signups or startups change in the default versus the variant? Again, the goal is to get all the KPIs moving forward, but sometimes they don't. And then you have to have those conversations. And then, like, for example, we did reduce our chat usage by a little bit. Then you have to have the conversation to say, okay, overall business was higher. These KPIs were higher. Let's say your change was less than 5%. And then you put that out into revenue. This is what it means in terms of revenue. Because you're always trying to balance that revenue. Yes, you want stakeholders to be happy, but ultimately we're trying to sell product and make customers happy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You wouldn't naturally think of a business like Signet's as having all those different dimensions. But once you bring it up, it's really obvious that you run an experiment, you're going to have your key KPI, which I assume is, did they buy a ring? But that you got so many additional metrics that you need to be looking at with each experiment. And I'm betting you even start to look at slices of those depending on how you segment your customers.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
When experiments lose, how do you try to extract the most amount of learnings possible from them?
I don't want to say I enjoy when experiments lose. That just sounds, who wants their thing to lose? But
Right.
it does give you an opportunity to kind of dissect it and say, okay, where in this process, where did it go wrong? Was the hypothesis just off the mark? Was the visitor issue that we were trying to solve not really a visitor issue? We'll see that a lot of times where stakeholders or product teams will come in and say, X thing needs to change because of Y reason. And sometimes we won't do our due diligence and tease that out and truly figure out with data, is this a problem? And we'll just say, yeah, okay, cool. You know your stuff, we'll do it. Those typically fail because product had something in their mind they assumed was the problem and it actually wasn't the problem. So it becomes an education opportunity. You say, okay, here's what you said was happening. Here's the data of actually what is happening, and here's why this experiment didn't work. And allows us to readjust and come back and say, okay, knowing the problem, here's a couple different ways we can design a solution to fix that. So we always try to tease that out. Sometimes we'll run experiments knowing, having an idea that they will lose, but depending on the level of person asking for it, doing it. And again, it becomes an educational session to say, okay, we did this. We assumed it wasn't going to work. Here's why. And then validate that.
Yeah. Hopefully, as many of the experiences as possible are helping you to learn about that customer journey and what really matters to them and what doesn't. And hopefully you're extracting insights along the way that can then inform how you think about the next feature or the next problem you're trying to address.
Yeah, 100%. That's what we have, a backlog of library. And I think anybody in experimentation understands that trying to keep this stuff straight is a challenge in and of itself. But the teams work really hard at putting together a library that kind of pulls out, like, here's what we were trying to test. Here's what we were hoping to learn. And here are the results. Here are the next steps. And then it becomes like a flywheel where we can always go back and look at what happened, the iteration that we've run after that. What are we going to do next? And it's not just walled off to us, to our experimentation team. We open that up to everyone so that there is this insight, there is this knowledge. And the team does a really good job of kind of pulling those things out as opposed to just saying, here's the data, and then letting somebody else interpret it. It's all, here's the data, and this is what it actually means. So yeah, we try really hard to educate what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so obviously you're looking at a ton of different metrics whenever you're running an experiment. And I'm sure just the did they buy or not is probably your North Star. But how do you think about all the other metrics you're looking at and which ones rank more highly for you?
I would say our North Star metric isn't conversion.
Mm-hmm.
It's revenue. So I'm looking at revenue per visitor. Conversion's there, right? So we're always going to look at conversion. Did they order? Other like the add to cards there. We look at those, but conversion and revenue to me are the two most critical, with revenue being most important. Mainly because I can change conversion rate relatively easily. If I come in, I use this example all the time. Like, I can guarantee you 100% conversion rate. And I guarantee you'll be out of business in a week because I'm going to make everything free.
Right.
There's no reason for somebody not to convert, right?
Right.
So conversion's able to be manipulated, or just stop looking at bad traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Local typically bounces a lot. So if I just take that all out, my conversion is going to double. That doesn't mean anything if my revenue is going up or not going correct, right? So if I can get revenue per visit going up and I have one metric to look at, that's what I'm all looking at.
Yeah. And are there kind of key ways in which you're segmenting the business, repeat customers versus new customers, things like that?
Short answer, yes. Repeat versus new, it's fine. I don't necessarily look at it too much. For us, when we started this whole personalization idea and testing into personalization, looking at the site, there were two distinct groups: those who shop for engagement rings and those who aren't. And we started with that at a very high macro level and started running these experiments to say, if I know somebody's shopping for engagement ring, let's make the experience all about engagement. And if I know they're already married and they don't need an engagement ring, don't show them the engagement messages. And I don't think, surprising to anybody, those two messages geared toward the right audience made a ton of difference.
Yeah.
But as a business, we're like, it's engagement season, so we're push engagement, which makes sense. Like, that's the business initiative, but it doesn't make sense who's been married for 25 years. They're like, I don't need them. So just making those things.
Yeah. Is there an engagement season?
It depends. Marketing thinks there is. So there's two times it's usually like spring and then around the holidays where you're more focused on talking about engagement, because that's when either the weddings are happening or you're getting ready to propose. Big marketing initiatives. But
Got it.
to me, engagement season is much like birthdays. It's happening every single day.
Yeah, right. How do you see experimentation evolving at your company?
For us, we're definitely leaning more into the idea of intent-based personalization and then testing that against non-intent-based. So I just gave the example of engagement versus fashion. Two big macro buckets. But if we think about this, there's so much nuance in each one of them that it gives you a lot of opportunity to explore different intents. So for example, say somebody's coming and they're just starting their engagement journey. From when they start to when they purchase could be 6 months. They're educating themselves. This is a major purchase. Do I want to get engaged? I don't know. What type of ring, so forth and so on. So pushing a sale message or something right at the beginning doesn't make sense. Compare that to somebody who's buying something for themselves. They know what they like. It's going to be a faster shop. So leaning into some of these things where they're showing signs, different signs of intent, like what level of intent are they? And then even when they have high intent, they're going to buy an engagement ring. They're going to buy a gift or something for themselves. Understanding how they're traveling through the site to change the experience. Again, going back to the overall journey, the experience that customer's having. If they're showing signs of struggling, like maybe they fell on that view all page and they can't find the right style of engagement ring. How do we then test ways to intercept them when they're struggling and give them a prompt to say, hey, we can help you. What type of metal or what style, or maybe they get a quiz or one of those things. The journey might be really long and very different between fashion and engagement, but if we understand the moments when they're starting to struggle or moments when they're like, hey, I know what I want, just get everything out of my way. Testing those types of ideas and those types of levers, we've seen to become really powerful. And there's just so much room and white space in there to play around with.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. How do you identify the people that are like, get out of my way, I know what I want?
Some of it comes from channel. Some of it comes from the behaviors, like their paths are very clean, very straight. We actually use a tool that helps us with that, made with intent, allows us in session to pull in additional data and make some predictions. So that kind of takes our intent levels in steroids.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of ways to do that where you're just understanding what customers are doing, what they're not doing, if they're pogo sticking, right? If they're going back and forth and back and forth. Some of that's going to be needed and necessary, especially if you're building your consideration set. But then sometimes if they're on a single PDP and they're scrolling up and down, they're looking for something, these are signals that they're struggling to find some sort of answer. And then the challenge is figuring out what they're asking themselves and what they need answers to, and pulling that in to some sort of experience.
Yeah. And to kind of wrap up the episode, one of the things that I can imagine with a business like yours is just like, how do you bring everybody along? You've got all these different stakeholders and different business units caring about different things. And the experience, it can be hard to unlock all the insight that you're gathering in experimentation and share that with the company. So how do you try to get that across?
So we do it a few different ways because we have different levels. So we'll start talking from CMO level down, and then we'll start talking from the person making the changes on the website up. hopefully we all meet. But yeah, it's a constant education. What we do, anytime we run an experiment, we send out an experiment plan that outlines exactly what we're doing, what the hypothesis is, what we're measuring, what questions we're looking to answer with the visuals. So this goes out to the entire digital group. And then we close that loop after the experiment completes and we've run our analysis. Same group gets the result. Win, lose, or draw, they get the results. Exactly what the metrics said, answers to the questions we asked, and then next steps. So that's kind of that ground level. So we'll send that out, and then that goes into our experiment library. And then once a month at the executive level, we'll have kind of touch bases. So obviously at that level, you can't get down into the nitty gritty. So I'll bubble all these up into kind of these 3 or 4 key insights for the month, outline them, and then all the insights have dollars and cents tied to them, knowing that at that level, they care about, are we making money? Yeah, the insights are great. I trust the teams to do those, but for that to have meaning at that level, I tie dollars and cents to everything that we're doing so that, oh, I get it. This is now an incremental bump by doing this key tactic. Let's keep pushing on that tactic. So they're going to push it down through their teams.
Yeah. I think that's such a great summary of a strategy for making sure you're bringing everybody along. I love the fact that you're tying revenue to the different ideas, because so often you might get a win somewhere, but is that really going to move the business or not? And so if you're able to connect it to revenue, that's really powerful.
Yeah, it's the only way that we've seen, because like you said, everything else, while it has data, their question is like, okay, so what? So does the other 12 priorities. Why do I hear about yours?
Yeah. How broad is that particular insight? Is it going to affect all our customers or just a small percentage? So
yeah, totally.
Thank you so much for joining today's episode. I feel like we learned a ton, and it's such an interesting business. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, totally appreciate it. It was just fun.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Better yet, share the episode with a friend. I'm Ashley Stirrup with Growth Book. We'll see you next time on the Experimentation Edge.